Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and with me we have Jackson Todd from 36X Racing and Jessica Ball from Just Games 95 and Joshua Birch Motorsport. As always, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. The link is in the video description if you would like to invest through Patreon. We also appreciate Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats. Now, Jackson, let's start off today's show by starting with Formula One, which is at the United States Circuit of the Americas.
Yes, for Formula One is back in the United States for the second time this year. This afternoon is United States Grand Prix sprint race at Circuit of the Americas. Max Verstappen is on pole and is the favorite to win today's sprint. Behind Verstappen is George Russell, Charles Leclerc, and then Lando Norris starting at fourth. Lando's teammate in the McLaren, Oscar Piastri, is 16th on the grid due to a track limits infraction in sprint qualifying. Jess, Isha, are you surprised by McLaren's sprint qualifying results?
For me, it's a bit of both because every time they go into the United States Grand Prix, they look pretty quick. They brought a suite of upgrades to Austin because it feels like it could be one of their strongest weekends. Their pace in practice was encouraging, but sprint qualifying, they made quite a few mistakes, even though their ideal lap was some of the highest in the grid so far. But with the sprint format, they only had one practice section to get it right. And with the sprint, the mediums are going to be used mainly, and they've been looking very good on the mediums with the medium speed turns. So we expect them to see well in the race. But with Oscar Piastri, track limits costed him, and with Lando Norris in Q3, it was turn 17, that error in turn 17 that costed him. Without that, that would have got pole. And Norris just wasn't comfortable with the balance of the car, and Piastri's lap thought it was shocking. So I don't think it's going to be disappointing for them, but sure they would have wanted higher up. But for Piastri, he's looking things higher up. It is a sprint race after all. He's got plenty of chances to improve his setup, ready for qualifying. But yeah, it's a bit of both, really.
Yes, I completely agree with Jess. It is a little bit surprising because usually we're not used to seeing them a little bit further back, especially with Oscar. But I think that, they'll be able to recover. I think that, as Jess pointed out, it's that one practice session that they just didn't have time to figure out how the car fits the track and, figure out what's the best move. But I think that come the sprint today, I think that they'll be able to do better. And then obviously for the race tomorrow too, I think that they just need more time to get the car suited to the track.
Where McLaren might have struggled to roll off the truck a little with the speed or handling that they were looking for, Ferrari certainly did. Charles Leclerc, of course, would love a win this weekend at COTA. Ferrari has both drivers starting the sprint from the top five. They're the only team that can say that. Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen for Haas are both starting the sprint from the top 10. Is this a sign of the Ferrari Technical Alliance having an advantage at COTA? And what results should we expect from the Ferraris and the Haas teams this weekend?
Yeah, I think that, it does show a little bit that Ferrari's Team Alliance is having an advantage at COTA. I think that it just suits this track more, as is evident in what you said, Jackson. Ferrari is the only team that has two drivers in the top five right now, and then Haas also has both of its drivers in top 10. So, looking at the rest of the weekend, I think that we can expect good things from both teams. I think that Ferrari is definitely going to have their two drivers finish the race tomorrow, probably in top five, top six. And then I think Haas is also going to have at least one driver in the top 10 finish the race. So I think that both teams are looking at bringing home some good points tomorrow.
Ferrari, you usually look pretty quick around here. Charles Leclerc did very well last year, if it wasn't for that disqualification due to the planking issue. And Ferrari, around this track, they were one of the first teams to adapt to it very quickly. They were 1 and 2 in practice on the soft tyres. I feel like that they're going to be more comfortable on the medium tyres, but on the softs, that's probably why they didn't quite have the pace in qualifying. So I would expect them to challenge the likes of George Russell, Max Verstappen, and the likes of the other McLarens as well. So I would expect them to do well. Kevin Magnussen, I've seen him battle quite a few times around here. I know Seb Vettel came to mind with that as well a few years ago. And Nico Hulkenberg, he likes his P6, doesn't he, in qualifying in the sprint. He usually goes well in the sprint. So I'm not really surprised to see him up there. He's been looking so good around there. So I would expect him to pretty much try and defend for his life because only the top 8 score points. But still looking strong for the Ferrari-powered teams, and let's hope it stays there for the rest of the weekend.
Very interesting. Most of the top 10 qualifiers are usual suspects. However, we do have one notable young name up there. Franco Colapinto qualified 10th for the sprint race, well ahead of several big-name veterans like Sergio Perez in 11th, Fernando Alonso, and even we already mentioned Oscar Piastri, and then his own teammate Alex Albon down in 18th. Some of that, of course, via track limit issues, but still, it looks good for the more fresh Williams driver. Can Colapinto and Williams repeat the same later today in proper Grand Prix qualifying? And what could we expect in race results?
To be fair, Colapinto was one of the big surprises in sprint qualifying because he hasn't that much experience in an F1 car around. Kota, of course, is his first season, and he's dropped into the Williams car very, very quickly. And he was up there beating his teammate. He didn't have that much track limit issues, and he only had one session. So he was one of my stars of the afternoon yesterday, well, evening yesterday in our time, to be honest. So I think he's got a lot of work to do because usually most people would have 3 sessions to get the car pretty much right for the sprint and get into race mode. Whereas Colapinto only had 1 session to get into grips, and he's done so well. Luckily, it's only a shorter session, so he should be able to manage the tyres fine. But he's got some really fast drivers, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, as you were saying as well, Piastri climbing up there. So he's got a lot of work to do. But Williams have a really great car, one of the only cars to not bring any upgrades this weekend. So that makes Colapinto's pace even more impressive.
Yes, I agree with you, Jess. I think that Colapinto and Williams can totally repeat good results later today for the proper qualifying for tomorrow's race. And I think that, Franco Colapinto's done an amazing job since he replaced Logan Sargent at Williams. He's been performing, I would say, consistently well. And, as Jess pointed out, Williams hasn't brought any upgrades either this weekend. But I think that that could pose an advantage to Colapinto because he won't have to figure out how to adjust to those upgrades. So, I think that we can totally see some great results from Colapinto and Williams both today and tomorrow.
All right. Now we have to talk about the only driver we haven't talked about at the top of the standings. Max Verstappen currently leading the Drivers' Championship. Red Bull second in the Constructors' Championship. Verstappen is on pole for the sprint. He has not won a Grand Prix since Spain back in June. Is there a chance, do you believe, Jess and Isha, that Verstappen and Red Bull could pull off a sweep of the sprint and Grand Prix weekend?
I think what Max Verstappen has shown this weekend is he's able to adapt very quickly, again, with the limited amount of sessions. And the last win he's had was in a sprint race. So I think Verstappen, loves this track. He loves the battles that he's had. I think Lewis Hamilton, he had a battle win last year as well. This is Verstappen's time to shine this weekend because we know we had that controversy with the ride height and that being taken away from Red Bull. And Verstappen still shines. So he proved the critics wrong. I think he's more motivated this weekend due to the controversy. He wants to show that didn't make a difference in this car. And he wants to show the other teams that Red Bull is still here to stay and he can still win this championship. So I still think, even though most people may not like it, I still think Max Verstappen would win the sprint race, but I think the main race he's going to be a bit of a challenge with all the other drivers. But for the sprint race, I think Verstappen's got it.
Yes, I think that for the sprint, Verstappen's definitely taking the points. However, for the Grand Prix, I think it's going to be more difficult. I think Ferrari can pose a challenge, and then also Lando Norris, of course. So I think it's going to be more difficult to say how the race tomorrow will go, but I think as far as sprint is concerned, Max is going to be starting on pole. George Russell will be close behind, but I think that Max is going to be taking those points home. But with that, let us now transition over to our NASCAR section. So Las Vegas Motor Speedway, South Point 400 is this weekend. Kyle Larson has to feel pretty good entering this weekend after a dominant win at Charlotte. However, his playoffs have been interesting. He did have a crash start of each round, Atlanta and Kansas, and then he also had wins the last race of each round at Bristol and Charlotte. So Jackson, is Kyle Larson a favorite to win this weekend, or do you think his inconsistency can be a concern to miss the Final Four?
I think Larson is pretty much always a favorite, unless you're going to a drafting track. So it certainly includes this weekend. The inconsistency from Larson is concerning, but it's kind of always been that way. I mean, I guess maybe not always been that way for the 5 team with a while, but they'll show up and dominate. They'll run in the top five, and every once in a while something just happens. And it hasn't been a pretty playoff for them, but they've also like the dominant win at Bristol and the dominant win at Roval. So for every error, there's a race domination coming out of the 5 camp. Inconsistency is concerning. Yes, I think he's a favorite today. He has 52 playoff points, which is 20 more than second seed Christopher Bell has right now. He's plus 33 to the cut. That's a little bit of a brace. Even in the round of 8, you have that big of a buffer. That's a good cushion to the cut line. So I think Larson should be fine today. Inconsistency concerning, but at this point in the season, it's just win, get to the end. I think they can do that.
All right, now this year we saw 3 non-playoff drivers win races in the playoffs. Kyle Larson and Joey Logano are the only playoff drivers to win during the playoffs. So Jackson, what do you think is the probability that a non-playoff driver will win in Las Vegas this weekend, and who do you think that could be?
Yeah, I think some of that kind of comes to like the messy playoff schedule that we've had this year with some pretty funky tracks. Granted, Logano won on what would have been considered one of those funky tracks at Atlanta. But the most recent round of 8 race won by a non-playoff driver was Larson back at Homestead in the middle of the round of 8 in 2022. The most recent, round of 8 race not won by a playoff driver. I'd expect a playoff driver to win. Like this is a pretty solid. This is a standard. Like if you were going to draw up the round of 8 for this year, this is a group of favorites. And for that reason, when they're going to 2 intermediate tracks in Martinsville, you'd expect them to have success here as well. So I would pick that a playoff driver is going to win this race. But if I had to pick one non-playoff driver to look at, I'm picking Ty Gibbs. He's at 83 career starts. He is due for that first win. He finished 5th at Kansas a couple weeks ago, 3rd at Michigan a couple weeks before that, kind of another recent intermediate style track. And then he finished 5th at Vegas in the spring. So those are 3 great top 5 results in recent meaningful races for Gibbs. So I'd expect him to be in contention. I'm not sure how the playoff dynamic will work with his teammates, but Ty Gibbs should be in the picture this weekend.
All right, now this round of the playoffs has Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville. No track that anyone would call a wild card like Atlanta or Talladega, but the tracks are known for producing some great racing and close competition still. So every point will count in the 8 drivers left in the playoffs. Jackson, is this the best 3 tracks for this round, or do you think it lacks a wild card race?
Yeah, I'm sure we could, sit and build like the best schedule in a variety of different ways. But I think after the chaotic schedule in the first 2 rounds, where like in the last round, Kansas was the only like normal track with Talladega and the Roval in there. I think this is a fantastic round of 8. It balances out with the rest of the playoffs. This round carries so much weight where like your playoff points get you to the round of 8, it feels like, and then here you are, go find your spot in the final 4. So I think this is a great 3 tracks to make this happen. I think it's a pretty good like 3 market in terms of like the marketability of the race. It's like Vegas, Miami, and then you go to Martinsville, back sort of your roots at the short track after the big market. So I think this is a really great schedule and a really great round. When like I mentioned already, this is such a textbook group of 8 drivers heading to 3 kind of great tracks for all of them. They all have strengths at these places, and it's really be a slugfest and a great battle through to the end.
All right, Jackson, now let's put you on the spot to predict the 4 that will not be making it. So far, Joe has gotten 2 correct to not advance to the round of 12, then another 2 that did not advance to the round of 8. So Jackson, which 4 drivers will not compete for a championship at Phoenix?
The way I developed this is I went through the 3 races here, and I had to think, okay, who could win each race? So for Vegas winner, I'm thinking William Byron. For Homestead winner, I'm thinking Tyler Reddick. For a Martinsville winner, I'm thinking Kyle Larson. So I'm advancing those 3. And then I'm going to pick a driver that has a lot of playoff points that I think is going to put up strong runs in each of those races, and that's Christopher Bell, which those are currently the top 4 above the cut line, which means I would be eliminating Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, and Joey Logano. It's hard to there's a reason that those are the top four. There's a reason that those four have the most playoff points. And I mean, I would expect them to continue through. Those have been the top four all year. Really, anybody that next four down, although you can make a strong case for them winning a championship, it would be an upset over the top four that I've said. Although William Byron he had a really great spring and then he kind of fell off through the summer. Byron has had a quietly fantastic playoffs. He's still waiting for a win, which is why I think he could win at Vegas this weekend, and then launch himself in the championship four. But yeah, I mean the other ones, I feel like you kind of I don't know if I even need to explain it. Like Larson, we talked about how great he's been. Reddick, sort of questionable in the playoffs, but I think between the playoff point supply and the tracks we're going to, he'll be able to advance just fine. And then Christopher Bell, I mean, he's just always around, and I expect him to be there once again.
All right. Now that's all for our NASCAR section. Let's bring Jess back in for our pick a winner where we too can score some points.
Yes, indeed. One of our favourite parts of the Grid Network, and plenty of chances for you to predict who's going to be winning each race. We've got the F1, of course. We've got the MotoGP at Phillip Island, and we've got NASCAR. If you want to get involved, make sure you comment on our socials. Who will win each race? 1 point for each correct guess. A bonus points if you're outside the top 10 and 20 in the standings. We'll go to Jackson first for his pick a winner for this afternoon's sprint race for the F1.
The sprint, I like Jess. I like what you were saying earlier about Verstappen getting it done in the sprint, maybe not in the Grand Prix. My pick a winner for the sprint is Verstappen.
I'm going to mirror Jackson and also go with Verstappen for the sprint.
I'm going to go for the clean sweep, and I'm going to go for Max Verstappen for the sprint. But will he be able to do it in the main race, Jackson? Who's your winner for the main race?
All right, so now this is where I'm jumping ship. I'm picking Charles Leclerc to win the United States Grand Prix.
Whoa.
All right, so this is really difficult. I was thinking about this before the show, and I kept getting stuck. I was like, do I think Max could do it? But then I'm like, you know what? I'll give him the sprint. But who's going to take the Grand Prix? I was stuck between maybe Lando, maybe Charles, because Ferrari is doing pretty well at this track. Lando's pretty fierce. But you know, I feel like Jackson saying that swayed me a little bit, and I'm also gonna go Charles.
You guys have made some very interesting arguments. I'm also torn between Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris, and maybe George Russell as well, because he did so well in sprint. But unfortunately, this is the first time I'm going to have to disagree with you all. I'm going to go with Lando Norris. So the next action that we've got is Phillip Island. Yeah, somebody had to. I'm sorry. I thought I'd go with someone different. The next action that we've got is Phillip Island in Australia. Of course, we had the Tissos Sprint already, so we got the main race action coming up later on this evening after the qualifying for the United States Grand Prix. So, Jackson, who's going to win the main race for MotoGP today?
I've gone with my consistent MotoGP pick of Jorge Martin.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to second that. It seems like I'm just copying Jackson today. That's not what's happening. But I'm also gonna
I think this one's quite an easy one as well. I'm gonna go for the clean sweep. I'm gonna go with Jorge Martin for the MotoGP as well. And finally, we got NASCAR, and that's at Las Vegas. We know anything could happen at Las Vegas. Jackson, who's your pick a winner for NASCAR?
I am kind of going with where I was going during the NASCAR bit. I'm following through. My pick a winner for Las Vegas is William Byron.
All right. See, my answer is going to be different this time. I'm going with Kyle Larson.
I'm going to agree with Isha this time. And sorry, Jackson. I'm going to go with Kyle Larson. So that is our pick a winners. Make sure you comment on X or any of our social on who you think would win each race. I'll now hand it over to Isha to close the show.
That's right. So that brings us to the end of our show for today. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and tune in for more content tomorrow. Grid Live wrap up about 90 minutes after NASCAR or Formula One, depending on who finishes later. Ben and Brandon go on the air on another Motor Monday with Grid Encore, Kobe with Grid Tonight, and Matt with the Endurance Performance Index, so don't miss any of our programs. For Jackson and Jessica, I'm Isha. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the race.